Okay, thank you for your patience. There's a YouTube problem, StreamYard problem, internet problem, hit all at once. Okay, I'm going to welcome you. Um, this was just so screwed up. I had it all arranged and then just a computer problem. So glad to have you all here back on. And let me get my guest on. We can chat amongst yourself while we set this up. Okay. I just have to get Jamie over. Usually I'm so much more organized. Like I said, my apologies. And shit happens. I could not make it go right. And for that, I apologize. But it'll be worth it, I assure you. So, the best laid plans of Satan's and men go wrong. And women and all creatures, great and small. Okay, so just let me okay. Okay, I sent you the link and we're live.
Okay, I'll be see you in a second.
Very good. Okay, good. Everything worked out. Everything worked out. I'm going to upload something and just to entertain you. Now, this is I colorized a picture of L. Ron Hubbard. Now, in the in the comments, one, if this looks pedo, two, if it does not. I got to tell you, I'm using a program called Kazi AI, and I colorized Ron on the ship. I'm making it go right now. Thank you, the Scientology experience. But what do you think of Ron? Look at that muscle man image. Is this pedo? Is it weird? Put a one if you think the image is weird. One in the comments, and just also to let me know that we're live and you can hear me because I looked. That is Indiana Jones is making it. I'm making it go right, and let me just see and edit screen. Okay, now we should be. Okay, Jamie.
Hey, now it looks normal. Now it looks normal.
I know, but we have to remove Dr. Hubbard. Oh, you're in the dark.
Am I too dark? Should I turn on some light?
You should turn on at least one light.
Okay.
Otherwise, you look like I'm interviewing a mystery man.
Okay.
We deliberately kept the man in the dark so the viewers cannot see who he is. World famous author. There he is. Okay. Well, welcome, everyone. Sorry, it all came together. Oh, hi, Lupizza. We have Thursday before 2, the Scientology experience. I like these names. The question X 4526, Sweet Liberty. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. I'm glad you're here Thursday before 2. Welcome, Jamie Mustard, author of Child X.
Hello. Thank you. Thank
you for having me. Yeah, well, it's been too long. I have been working on 2 manuscripts, and Jamie's been working behind the scenes with me. They're both amazing. And your Child X, Jamie, it's a great book. And I'm jealous because I want hybrid. And one thing I want you to talk about is your new. Thank you, Pizza, Jamie. Your new graphic novel, Hybrid. Can you show it to us and tell us what it's about?
Yeah, it just came out last week. I was never going to. It's got some amazing. I made this art with this incredible genius artist in Italy.
Wow.
Yeah, in Italy, and we've been working on and off for years. It's all told in paintings, but it really is kind of the story of my life, a supernatural sci-fi future adjacent LA story of my life that I started before Child X, because I was never going to write Child X. And I guess in certain ways, through science fiction, you can tell more truth sometimes than you can through nonfiction.
Yeah.
So there's elements of this book, Hybrid, that are even more experiential because you can see things than in terms of getting to understand what the feeling was like of growing up as a child in a religious paramilitary organization. I feel like there's a terror and a horror and a beauty captured in Hybrid that is, yeah, I mean, the early reviews came in. Probably the most influential comic book platform in the world is called The Beat.
Yeah.
And I mean, Time Magazine named them one of the 25 most influential blogs in the world in any subject. They won the Eisner for journalism last year, and they gave me quite a review when the book came out last week. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
And
I read it. It was extraordinary. By the way, good to see you, Denise Locker. She's been one of my long time with me.
Oh, good.
And Jamie, when you do graphic novels, I'm waiting for it. Like I said, I'm jealous that Lupita got her copy before me. I wanted to have it for tonight's show. I ordered it, but um, I just didn't get it yet. So congratulations, because you've done Child X. What was that? 2 months ago?
No, that came out
And
at
then
the end of July, early August, and so it's been a few
it's been
months.
that long. Wow. And then you have your graphic novel Hybrid. So how many books do you have now? You have
Well,
like,
come April, I have one more
yeah,
graphic novel coming out in April. That will
wow.
be 6 books. It's a lot.
Amazing.
It's a lot.
Amazing. And without talking about my project on Scientology, the book I'm writing on Scientology, the manuscript is beautiful, but I'm seeking Jamie's help. I've I've written quite a bit on my blog, but I got to tell you, Jamie is a master of the book world. And what's funny is that Scientology doesn't get it about the book world at all. They have a publishing company and they have a captive audience, but they are so asynchronous with pop culture that if it bit them all they have is Tom Cruise, and he keeps it on the down low.
Well, and
You
then
know?
when he talks about it, he's anathema to the public taste. I
Yeah.
mean, they can't stand him. It turns. He doesn't know how to talk about it.
No,
Yeah.
and I think what we're going to talk about today is children in Scientology's paramilitary.
Yeah, and I have
And
had a sneak peek. And let me say one nice thing about you.
yeah,
You said some nice things about me. I have had a sneak peek at your book, and I'm just kind of blown away by your point of view in the forensics and your
oh,
unique way of
thank you.
looking at the world. And one of the reasons I like talking to you is I feel like you have a unique place in the kind of forensic, the kind of modern forensic accounting of what's going on in this world in a way that I've never seen, and I'm a fan.
Oh, well,
So
thank you.
yeah, you got it.
Yeah,
So
I carefully ordered. This is the book I'm writing. You have to know metaphysics, engineering, marketing, and you also have to be a PI following the money, because often, Jamie, and this is for the audience, and we all know this from watching crime shows: money, sex, or revenge. And what's
you
interesting,
you
and
just described Scientology.
yeah, it's like
It,
when you look at it, the book, my book's going to be very surprising. It's a deconstruction, and
it's in a lot of ways, Jeffrey. Scientology is the ultimate in true crime.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
You have said it really well. It's a criminal syndicate, and but the way I make the case, the way I lay it out, having as an analysis, it's prosecutorial in parts. So the art of writing a book, you excel at it. That's why I like Child X. It was literary and beautiful. It made me cry. It's really touching. So it takes a lot of people with a lot of different talents to take down this monster. Let's get started with children in Scientology's paramilitary. Those are two unlike things. children in a paramilitary. You
Well,
see pictures in the third world of really boys 12, 13 with AK-47 smoking cigarettes, and it's horrific. I have two sons, and I couldn't imagine the terror. But I wanted to add this to the stage, and I want to get your impression just visually. Okay, so I colorized some picture. I was showing this to the audience earlier, but this is L. Ron Hubbard colorized. He's about, I don't know, this is 67, 68. He's on, or when he did the Granada TV interview.
yeah, so he's on the Apollo in his office.
Yeah, now look at the muscle man. This is kind of like when he wrote later his what was it? What was that Decalogue called Mission Earth, the 10-book
Yeah,
series?
yeah.
It was just it's just infused with homoeroticism. If I don't know if you've ever read some
I
of
mean,
those.
when I was a young lad, wee lad, did I read all of it? Maybe I did.
Yeah, some scenes are really creepy, and well, that's another show. But this is Hubbard colorized, and what I'm finding out so much I like about AI is I use a program to colorize, and one thing I like to do as an artist is by colorizing old images, people who've seen the same Scientology images over and over and over, colorized, you kind of grow numb to them. Been there, done that, right?
It's a good point.
But now this next one was just chilling. What's your impression of this, Jamie?
My impression is of a child that is innocent, that is feeling honored and special, but doesn't know that he's staring into the eyes of a monster and that he doesn't know what is coming for him.
Yeah.
Because something is coming for that child. It came for me. I was born into Scientology's paramilitary, turned over to them at birth, 811 Beacon Street, near downtown Los Angeles, right on the edge of downtown Los Angeles. And, filled with, well, that was a period of neglect, but as long as as I can remember in terms of when I could talk, the only word I could describe I would use the word horror and terror. But
Yeah.
when it's all that you know and you're being told that it's salvation, that's quite a thing.
Yeah, and something I want to make, when an adult enters Scientology, you sign 4 contracts. Okay, you have to see a film, then you sign a contract stripping you of your civil and legal rights. You sign a contract, which is I call it the kidnap contract. If you go type 3, they can hold you captive. And then you agree to binding arbitration. When you enter as an adult, you sign contracts. Then they do a sec check on you, life history. Being born into it, you don't have any baseline reality. The argument that Scientology tricks people into joining, that's a debate. Okay? And some people, yes, some people, no. But I think the younger you are, if you're born into it, you obviously don't know the structure you're going into. An adult, when they talk about how you're going to pay with credit cards and things, so I just want to make absolute difference, but having raised kids, absolute difference between children and then, born into infants and young children, school age, teenagers, those years, young adults. So we're not looking at an either or. It's kind of like you were born into it, so you didn't have any baseline knowledge of what the world was like. You only knew Scientology. And we were discussing childhood trauma and the neurophysiology of it. So when a child is born and you were traumatized from a very early age, what does that do to your brain physically that would not happen to an adult who enters?
Well, let me say, can I lead into that with just commenting on the first
please.
thing you said?
Yeah.
First of all, I'm going to say something that That's what I believe.
Yeah.
I would say that 95 to 95, 95 to 99% of the people that leave Scientology in a lot of ways, and even become an activist against it. I believe that most of those people, 95 to 90%, remain Scientologists.
Mhm.
I would even say that in a lot of ways about myself. Every time that I think I've gotten over it, I'm finding behavior all the time.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's black and white thinking, having an ad hominem or singular negative view. I guess that's a form of black and white thinking against somebody that I got a beef with, not seeing the nuances of a situation or a human being. When someone gets, you know, when someone upsets me, the feeling of wanting to disconnect from them, cut them off entirely, or to put their head on a pike and punish them and give them a severe reality adjustment and make them feel it.
Hmm.
These are feelings that I still deal with. So I think most of us, I don't know too many ex-Scientologists that don't remain Scientologists in their behavior and their thinking. I know people don't want to hear that, but uh, I think it's true. And I think that if you don't want to be that, you have to stand sentinel and watch yourself all the time, and you have to sort through a lot of stuff.
By way of comparison, Patrick here, Patrick, I don't agree with the percentage, but there is truth. So let me add my perspective. And I've talked about this a lot because look, I grew up in the Pentecostal church. I went to Assemblies of God
But
College.
let me, let me say one
No,
thing
no, no,
before.
no, no,
Okay, but
Jim,
then I
let's,
want to. Okay, then I want to
yeah,
just.
okay.
I want to say what
No,
I'm
I'm
saying.
saying that
Yeah.
a part of me will always be Pentecostal. A part of me will always be Southern. And that doesn't leave because like sometimes people will say stuff and I will think like what Bible verse I would give them because the Bible I know extremely well. So there's something about being a child and being formed with ideas of hell and judgment and righteousness for me and even the biblical. So some part of me will always be a Pentecostal for the better or the worst. It doesn't go, and believe me, I wish the bad parts of it would go away, but they don't. That was something that happened, to Patrick's point. So go ahead, please.
Well, I appreciate Patrick's comment. I appreciate him
Yeah,
thinking and weighing in.
yeah,
I would like to kind of clarify what I was saying. You
please.
know, I know a lot of people that have been. First of all, I'm using the word Scientologist. I don't even think Scientology exists. I really is a real thing. I don't believe it's a real modality. I think it's a hodgepodge of stolen mind manipulation. Maybe the most clever and sophisticated uh, mind control system in the history of the human species. But I don't look at it as a discipline or modality or some sort of legitimate therapeutic or religious activity.
Yeah,
There's no development of it. It may be the only right. I mean, this is a guy. There's no notes. There's a guy that sat down, had an idea, and that he took or made up, and then uh, it was either true or it wasn't, and he just put it together like it was all true. He was a hypnotist. One of his own he was a self-described hypnotist, and I don't know
yeah,
if it's in the Research and Discovery series or in the PDC, Philadelphia Doctorate lectures that he gave, but he describes hypnotism as truth, 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 lie, truth, truth,
mm,
truth, truth, and that's how you get somebody. But let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. There's
yeah,
a belief in this system. I've met a lot of people, especially adults, the baby boomer generation that were recruited into this thing in the 1970s and 80s.
yeah,
I don't, if I know hundreds of them, maybe thousands of them over the years. I can't think of maybe but three or four that I've ever met that don't firmly believe that a child is an adult in a baby body.
yeah,
They believe it. They believe it. They're out of Scientology. They hate Scientology. They hate David Miscavige that with total certainty, and they totally believe that their children and the pissed off children at YouTube that you see now are just trauma, drama, grown up people that were just adults in baby bodies. Right.
Yeah.
That's what I observe. I don't want to observe that. It's in my face all the time.
Mm,
What's in the milieu or the ether of this world, of this ex-Scientology, this ex-Hubbardism world, is a bunch of people that believe that children are adults. I don't. I talk about it all the time to my friends that are people that are older than me in that generation that were recruited into the movement in 70s and 80s, and they just talk to me like it's a given. It's not even up for debate or dispute.
yeah, and that's part of the indoctrination. Let me give you an example, and this is going to be controversial. The way I grew up in a Pentecostal environment, my family, my great uncle and uncle had a ranch up in Coulterville, and up there guns were part of the culture. So sometimes my brother and I would go out and hunt. We had to bring back some rabbits or something for stew, for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up around guns, and that was just part of life. And you 7, 8 years old, you got a 22 rifle, and your brother, and you got to go out and get something to eat. A lot of people understand up through the 50s and 60s, parts of up gold country weren't even electrified, and you had basically our ranch had a electric line and a phone, and that was it. And we had our own well, But I remember one of our neighbors being shocked that my dad would put a rifle in our hands at 7 and 8 years old. And my dad said, that's sometimes we have to eat up there because we don't want to take something out of the freezer, or there wasn't anything there. Make quick biscuits. So the view of children, my kids went to, public school, and then they did private, but parents have different views of children and what's appropriate and what's not. But what makes Scientology malicious? So you can agree about whether boys should even go into contact sports or girls should go into contact sports, whether children should go into like football where they could be future brain injury or future injuries. Because I would never go into contact sports when I was growing up. I didn't want I had a concussion, when I was young, in an accident, and I didn't want to get that kind of stuff. So people think, well, my son or daughter has to be hyper competitive and go into sports. My dad was not into sports. He was into guns. You should learn how to work on cars, use tools, use guns. In Scientology, the belief is children are adults and they should stop all this kid bullshit. And I know parents, who like, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Those people belong in jail, right? But what you're talking about specifically within Scientology is this pernicious belief that children are adults, which they're not. They can't be. It's neurologically impossible for
Well,
a child to
the
be an
insurance
adult.
the insurance companies follow biology. That's why you can be on your parents' insurance till you're 26. Charities like Child USA consider children up into the age of 26 because our brains are not fully formed until we're 26, and some say sometimes the male brain takes even longer than that. I just done this interview last week, or it came out last week. I did it a couple months ago with the most famous psychiatrist in the United States,
Yeah.
Daniel Amen. He's actually originally a child psychiatrist. What he did his residency in, and he has made his career and made himself, through data science of arguing that most mental health manifestations of what we call mental illness or disorder are actually physiological damage to the body.
Mm.
And one of the things he's discovered on his SPECT scan, which is actually a very loose scan, it's not as potent as an MRI, it only measures the surface of the brain. But for anyone that's had childhood trauma, intense stress as a child, their brain actually develops differently. And one of the things that you see is a diamond pattern in their brain, where you can see this on a SPECT scan, which is not even the most ideal scan. And what that means is overactivity in their anterior cingulate, their basal ganglia amygdala, and then their thalamus. And it creates a little diamond pattern. Okay. And that's a physiological injury that one gets from stress, extreme stress in childhood. And these trauma drama judgments, and that's another one, right? Scientology is punishment based and it's judgment based. Everything's a judgment. You're PTS, you're low toned, you're in a lower condition, you're uptoned, you're downstat, you're 1-1. It's all judgment based. It's all stigma based. It's all punishment drive.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Yeah, and so we know that there's a physiological. So this stuff that you're seeing maybe in the kids like me, or we were kids that were born in it or grew up in it, in the paramilitary, in the slave, in captivity, animalized. Is you're seeing people that actually have a brain injury, right? But what's so tragic about it is the judgment continues, right? It's not like you see someone, they're acting up, and you look at that person, you go, well, this person was born and raised in a religious paramilitary, in poverty, in captivity. Of course they're going to act like that. Nope. It's trauma drama. It's judgment. That's somebody still being a Scientologist that doesn't think, or a Hubbardist, because that thinks they're against it. That it's so ingrained in the thinking.
Now, Blow Drill has an interesting comment. The Scientologists also believe that you don't want to invalidate the being Thetan by treating them like they are a small child when they live thousands of lifetimes. Talk to that, Jamie. This is an interesting comment.
I
from
thought
Blow
it when you
Drill.
were okay. Listen, what you said earlier. What we said earlier is that children are adults in baby bodies. That's at the lightest point. That's if we're being generous and kind, and we're being like, bunnies and cotton candy, and we're being kind about how children are treated. But it's not really how children are treated. What Scientologists really believe, or Hubbardites really believe, because I don't believe there's such thing as Scientology. There's no modality. It's a bunch of feces and vomit and urine that one put in a hole and then buried it and then dug it up and peed and pooped and vomited in it again and did it again. That's what it is. In the words of Karen de la Care, it's a Frankenstein, but I would say it's a Frankenstein made with pus, blood, pestilence, urine, vomit, and feces. Okay.
Suffering.
And and if you want me to, I could be very specific about why I think that. But
it's in Child X. It's in Child X. It's your life.
Yeah. And then this book, in terms of if you want to see what it feels like, and see what it feels like, even though I'll say this. What Hubbardites really believe, and ex-Hubbardites kind of have a hard time letting go of, and again, I put myself in this category. Okay. Is they don't see a young puppy child, cute, with a developing brain that is unaware of most of the things going on in the world, that's limited by an organic brain that limits their capacity to understand the world, and the world is imprinting on them in a hyper powerful way because the brain is developing. They don't see that. What they mostly see, and to go beyond an adult in a baby body, what they're really seeing, and they believe it like gravity, is a trillion-year-old fallen god that's lived millions, if not billions, of lifetimes before, and all you need to do is just fucking remember. That is what they believe. So they're treating a child like that. Now, listen, if you look at, say, just basic geography or economic history, if you look at the way we were 400 years ago, before the first industrial revolution, okay, when we were primarily an agrarian society, human beings would be touching the baby for the first 2 years of life like any other primate. 85 to 90% of the time, for the first 2 years of life, the baby would be touching a parent. Now, in the modern world, through industrialization, that's flipped. Now it's 15%, 10% of the time. That's after 100,000 years of human evolution. This thing is flipped like a light switch. That right there is creating damage. Our evolutionary biology is not equipped for that. So what?
Well, you know what? It's not, Jamie, let me jump in. Let's just pivot for a minute. So I want to build on what you're saying. One thing I'm addressing in my book on Scientology is the neurophysiological cascade that occurs in auditing. And it's a thesis, it's a hypothesis rather, but it's supported by a lot of research and people I've talked to. Here's an image. Okay, so there's the existential condition, there's the imprinting, the indoctrination, brainwashing, call it what you will. Now, here's some images I wanted to run by you. This is a young person, and they're saddled with the Sea Org. We do whatever it takes. Now, that's a loaded phrase because that implies criminality. We do whatever it takes. We're not afraid to destroy people. Fair game. This is how I read this as a private investigator. We do whatever it takes is a license to destroy children, enslave them, destroy adults, fair game them, and destroy their lives, incomes. Scientology doesn't know what it's saying there, but once you've been up close personal or you were born into it, you know, Karen and I have gotten threat letters from their attorneys. It's like, okay, you know what our address of service is. We do whatever it takes. That includes enslaving children and telling them that they're trillion-year-old Satans. However,
Yeah,
the hypnotist is going to create a framework in which you are a trillion-year-old Satan. And look at this. We do whatever it takes to bring Dianetics and Scientology to the world. That means enrich Hubbard and his heirs and his signs. Our duty is to create a same planet. But what? That's no. But what this image of this young person with an e-meter? How do you? What's the?
what I think when I see that is,
Yeah.
I mean, it really goes back to physiology. Okay, there's a woman, a black doctor in Oakland. She opened a clinic in Oakland. Her name is Nadine Burke Harris. She wrote a book called The Deepest Well. She went a Harvard doctor. I think she was even at one point the deputy or the Surgeon General for California. She was in the Biden administration and kept and collected a tremendous amount of data at her clinic, where she was able to prove in this book, The Deepest Well, that the leading cause of disease in adult humans is childhood trauma.
Yeah.
So what's happening here? What's happening here is what we call prolonged allostatic load, toxic stress, carrying stress all the time. If I look at these kids, when I bump into these kids that I meet from the early days of being a child in captivity in the religious paramilitary of, you know, the Borg, the so-called Sea Borg. So many of these kids that I grew up with, they have autoimmune, they have fibromyalgia, they have dysautonomia. So these diseases, these autonomic diseases, are a product of carrying too much stress too long, and what that does is it discombobulates the immune system. You got all these hormones and adrenals and all these things going on that are firing all the time. It discombobulates the body, and that turns into disease. Right?
Yeah, and you've been through that now. Blow drill. This is a great comment. You're expected to be limitless and immediately be the persona of what your current task or mission. That's a lot of pressure for a developing mind. And that translates into adulthood disease, autoimmune damage.
Yeah, physiological
changes in the brain.
If you know, there's a book out there that everybody reads called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Well, if the body keeps the score, the sympathetic nervous system is the scorekeeper. And what the stress of growing up in the paramilitary does without parents. Listen, you wouldn't do well if your father was distant, if your mother was distant. You might be stressed out being bullied by going to daycare. But when you're growing up and you're away from your parents in an orphanage-like setting, 3 bunks high, in a Lord of the Flies thing, where you're being judged in a military type fashion. I mean, I just can't tell you, the constant vibe was you're bad, you're a POS, and then you have no support system around you. It would make Dostoevsky blush. Yeah, it is an existential nightmare.
It is.
And I want to say one thing just to paint a picture, and then I'll shut up. There was a friend of mine recently sent me an ad of the Epstein victims. And what was so clever about that ad is it was all of these women in their 40s and 50s, 40s, and they were holding up photographs of the age that they were
Oh yeah, I
when
saw
they
that.
were assaulted by Epstein. And it really brings home to you that this happened to children. And it really impacted me seeing that. And the reason it impacted me is if you look at the Aftermath TV show, which Leah and Mike Rinder did a phenomenal job on, actually.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yes.
if you look at that show, I saw a lot of my friends on that show, and um, they're 40 years old, they're 45 years old, they're 50 years old, and they're talking about these things that happened to them. But you're looking at an adult. That would be a very different conversation on each single episode or each single interview on the Aftermath if they were holding a picture of themselves at the age that they signed a billion-year contract.
Yeah, see right there. This is what you're describing. And let me push on in this, because one thing I really like what you're doing in your work, Jamie, is you're talking about the long-term changes to the brain, mood, affect, disease that carry into adulthood. And I'm gonna go to the next slide. So I want to get your impressions.
So the
Let- let-
fundamental. Okay.
no, let's leave that just for a minute. Our prize is the same planet. This is opposite world. Scientology's prize is not a same planet. It's like an insane group where they want to crush people and have them acquiesce. Look at this image. This is the bullshit they put out. They want the world to see these highly glossy shoops. She's holding cans. That's not the reality. I'm going to show you the reality. Okay, see these young idealized people with medals?
They look
This
like
is
they're
the
15
fake.
years old. They're
Yeah,
children.
these are young people. Fake space navy. But I want to show you the real. This is the facade. This is a young black man. This was an ad I got out of a Scientology magazine in 2007. This is a young black man at Flag holding open the door for rich, fat OTs, rich, overfed, fat OTs, and they have to overfeed them so they can be sessionable. So this young man is starving. He's Sea Org and he's black and he's holding open the door. Translate that for me.
I mean, it looks like AI to me.
No, it's
Okay.
real.
Okay,
When I saw this, I thought the optics
here's
of
the
it.
okay. Here's what I think when I see that. Listen,
Yeah,
first of all, to back it up, I'm going to keep repeating this. Okay,
yeah,
the fundamental belief among Hubbardites that are currently in the Hubbard organization and ex-Hubbardites is that children that were born and raised in the religious paramilitary or the children of the public are the same as the adults. That is the most fundamental, egregious, sick, demonic, diabolical lie that is keeping Scientology working. That lie, I believe, is the primary lie that is keeping Scientology working. And I'll tell you why, and then I'll get to this guy. Okay?
yeah.
Scientology is true crime. The most fundamental and egregious true crime, or the crime that they've ever committed, is what they've done to the child mind and the child body. This is the crime they've committed. It's the one thing that doesn't get talked about. Here we are, and we're 75 years after diuretics, right? And in the early 1970s, Paulette Cooper writes a book called The Scandal of Scientology. We have Going Clear. We have Inside of Scientology. I don't see any books about the paramilitary organization and what's being done to the kids. That's the worst thing they've done. 2 years ago, a guy in Denmark who felt guilty because he saw some kids in 1986 and he pushed it out of his head, a guy named Robert Dam, he published a massively successful memoir in Denmark and Sweden. And they said, you can write another book. Well, this thing haunted him. So he finally wrote a book called Hotels of Darkness, where he went around and he tried to find the kids in Europe and Copenhagen that were representative, that would be the adults of these kids that he pushed out of his head in 1986.
Yeah.
And he interviews them. So that book comes out in 2024, 2023, 75 years. That should have been book one on this subject. And I'll give you this last example, and then I'll talk about this guy and I'll shut up. Yeah. If you look at what just happened in Gaza, where we just watched the world's first genocide on Instagram and TikTok. And if you don't believe it's a genocide, no matter what the numbers are, the population was 2.2 million, 2.1, 2.2 million before it started, the bombing. 50% of the population of Gaza is under the age of 18. Now the current population of Gaza, and these people can't leave, it's an open air prison, is between 1.5 million and 1.6 million. So that's a lot of missing people.
Yes.
Okay, we're not going to be finding them alive, drunk at a nightclub. And most of them are children under the age of 18. So what's so remarkable about this, they say never again, but we not only did it happen again, we just saw it on TikTok and Instagram as it was happening. But why did it end? You know, if you would have said 3 years ago that it was possible for leaders of the G7 countries to come out and rebuke Israel for anything, it was impossible. And it's a shame, because the resurgence in anti-Semitism that is creating is tragic. Okay, but why did people that could never turn against Israel finally turn? One reason: too many dead kids. Where they said, okay, that's it. It's just too many dead children. There is a limit to the public stomach, the global stomach, for dead children, except or damaged children, maimed children, harmed children, and except among Hubbardites and ex-Hubbardites.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no limit. Okay, and it's amazing. I've had conversations with them where they'll read some part of my book and they'll say to me, "Oh, can you corroborate this?" Yeah, with you, because you told me this is how your child grew up.
Yeah.
Okay, but this idea that a kid is kept in an orphanage-like environment away from their parents in extreme poverty, getting psychologically tortured with threats of lower conditions, and downstat and low toned, and it's a punishment drive. Okay, and there's an incredible book out there by Dan Pink called Drive, about what actually fosters human productivity, and the whip is the least productive.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah.
Right. So there is a problem here. Right. We're going to do this video, and it's still going to be a problem, which is like ex-Hubbardites do not see children as children. And if you see a 40 or 50-year-old kid that grew up in the paramilitary losing it on YouTube, whether it's me or somebody else, and you're like, "Oh, look at that drama guy losing it," that's what this is. There's no compassion.
We have to go into, this is why we're talking. We have to open this up and talk about the very difficult, the dark. That's why I want to talk to you about it.
Okay, so let's talk about this guy right here. If he's real, this AI guy.
Yeah,
that you say is
this
real.
is an absolutely real magazine.
Okay, he looks like he's 15.
Jamie.
Okay, so let's go back to chattel slavery, right? When they first came here, and they needed to work this land, right? They needed to cultivate the United States. The first thing was, oh, let's take these indigenous people that are here now that have less technology than us, and let's enslave them. Let's put them to work. The problem is, when you try to enslave a people that are on their own land, that have their history, they would rather die than work as a slave. The indigenous people of North America were impossible to enslave. They would die faster. It was never going to happen. So listen, you have to look at the economic of slavery as purely an economic system. And that's why it's so appropriately being covered. I think it's so appropriate that you're covering it on the Scientology Money Project. So in order to actually get someone to produce as forced labor, as property, you have to take away their history, and you have to remove them from anything around them that orients them. And only then can you control them.
Okay, let me jump in at this point. To enslave someone, you have to take away their history. Now, you replace it with a history that says that they're a trillion-year-old Satan. So their parents are just Thetans. Their grandparents are Thetans, and they're trillion-year-old Thetans. Jamie, this is the difficult and dark part of Scientology. Is a lot of what people don't want to talk about. I'm willing to talk about the difficult, dark thing, and that's what the most difficult, dark part is. That it kills children,
I
and
mean,
I not always
the amount of
physically
dead,
killing them, but
well, the
yeah,
amount of dead friends that I have from the Melrose building is astonishing. You know,
yeah.
I mean, I don't really, out of respect for their families, I don't want to start naming them,
No,
right?
and in fact, no, and you
One
know
of the most,
the
yeah,
the reason this young man, the reason this resonated with me is studying Hubbard long term. This is Hubbard. I just want to bring out part of one of the elements of Hubbard, and I think Scientology. Scientology, Hubbard was obviously a racist. He wrote a letter to his wife, said, "I don't want you down on your floor cleaning the kitchen." And I'll post it. It's on my blog. And this is Hubbard in Rhodesia. His whole view is that he should have servants and slaves to serve him, right? It all rolls back up to this idea. He's the guy who said people are trillion-year-old Thetans, and that's how he steals your identity and makes you into a Scientologist. These are children. Now let's go to this other picture. These are cadets. A cadet is a way of stealing someone's history and family and giving them an enforced identity. These are here, put on your Navy hat. When you see this, comment on this image.
I mean, that's my childhood right there. So I'm seeing
Yeah.
my own reflection. But
So you had on the little Navy hat.
I didn't have that particular hat, but I had
Yeah.
a naval uniform from the time I was 5 years old. Sure.
Yeah.
The again, the majority of ex-Hubbardites of
Yeah.
your generation that are watching this right now are sitting here and they're looking at me and they're going, "He's so full of it." We're
Well,
all
I'd
the
be
same.
glad. I'd be glad to interview him if they want to. I'll give them
Yeah,
a platform if they want to talk to me. I'm glad to
yeah.
interview
The
anybody.
problem is that neuroscience and the rest of the world doesn't agree with them.
I know.
They're only going to find agreement that children aren't children, and that what didn't happen to the children that grew up in the paramilitary, as well as the kids that grew up in the public that were hit with this stuff, these same concepts. That wasn't special and hasn't had serious physiological effects on their brain development and their bodies. This is basic neuroscience. Ask AI. Okay.
Well, I
Which
mean,
will,
it looks like the last 18 months, I quit doing a lot of podcasting and blogging to
no,
study.
but can I just make one point, Jeffrey? Because I
Yeah.
said it's the most
Yeah.
diabolical lie that is keeping Scientology working, and I want to clarify that. Okay.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is Scientology's greatest crime is the absolute evisceration, destruction of the child body, and especially the child mind, which has resulted in countless deaths. Liz Gale's receipt was just a mere fraction of that list because
Yeah.
most of the kids are too ashamed to talk.
Yeah, they are. In
Okay,
fact, you told me of your struggle to write Child X because of the shame.
yeah, so there's two,
It
and then
kept
when
you
I
locked. That shame kept you bound.
yeah, and I had a facilitated conversation with Robert Dam when he wrote the book Hotels of Darkness, and I said, did any of the kids that you talked to for that book, do they speak out? Are these kids that are public? No. And I said,
Yeah.
he didn't know anything about me. So when Child X was not out, I asked him this question. He knew nothing about my past. And I asked him one question. I said, why do you think? And he said, a lot of these kids wouldn't let me use their name. And I said, okay, well, why do you think they won't speak out? And why do they not want their name used? And he said one word: shame.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I say that it's the most diabolical lie that is keeping Scientology working, this is the crime. If it would stop the war, if the G7 leaders, if 2 or 3 ex-Israeli prime ministers would say too much, the prime minister of Germany, the prime minister of France, the prime minister of England says enough, this is genocide. Every major academic think tank in the world that studies genocide says this is genocide. This isn't me talking.
Yeah.
Okay, these are independent organizations that have a neutrality and an academic way of approaching these subjects.
Mhm.
It's child death and child harm where people go enough, except with ex-Hubbardites and Hubbardites.
So
Right?
how do we, this
Here's
is,
the point. Here's the point.
yeah,
If that became the battle cry of this movement, like it would be in any other movement on earth that didn't go through Hubbard's indoctrination of systematically removing empathy through training routines, of controlling a person the minute they walk in the door, getting them conditioned to control through the objectives where they have to go around it. Okay, if you look at the training routines, you're telling a person not to react when something dramatic is happening in their environment, to deny the nervous system. Well, you can teach somebody to do that, but you're also, they're going to be turning off the nervous system when they should be taking action, when they should be getting rattled. The body tells us when something's wrong.
yeah.
So if we practice through these training routines, denying the body, then we're going to deny the body when the body is telling us that something's wrong, like seeing a kid like me at 7 years old walking around without underwear, not in school, dirty and disheveled, unshowered, while these rich guys are clambering up the steps of the advanced division on Berendo to get their courses and thinking nothing of it.
Yeah. Let me jump in with this image. Okay, here's a young boy. This was taken by an activist on the street, and I can't find his name. I think it's Steve. And he took this. This is a piece. This is the physical manifestation, but in working to change the conversation to make former Scientologists aware that the real crime is against children, it's an economic crime to be sure. But the amount of suicides,
it's all about free labor.
but the amount of suicides and death, the human wreckage, especially people born into it. So that's why I want to help change.
So what I'm saying, Jeffrey, I feel like if it became the battle cry, the amount of public outrage against what this group is doing, and the amount of allies, the amount of people that would be working against this movement would be exponentials of exponentials if the child damage and the child harm was put up front. I don't have an agenda. I mean, listen, I'm damaged. I'm messed up from this thing. I claim I'm a product. Everything I'm saying about what this does to a child, it's done to me.
Absolutely. And here's a contrast I want to show you. There's this child being in the lower condition, right? And over against this, you have David Miscavige, who was born into Scientology, right? Or came in when he was 10. They want the public to see the wealth, the money, the movie stars. They don't, the church, and even a lot of ex-members don't want them to see the degraded and debased conditions of children, and especially in the paramilitary. So this contrast was, I put this contrast up deliberately to show.
You know what it reminds me of? I'll ask you a question, Jeffrey. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Catholic Church. What is the Catholic Church like today in terms of membership and belief and support compared to what it was 50 years ago?
Yeah.
It's a fraction of what it was. Why? Because the damage to children came to the forefront, and it devastated.
It did, but you know what? Here in LA, it took 25 years. And Cardinal Mahoney, the former Cardinal Mahoney, that son of a bitch fought 25 years to keep things from LAPD, from prosecutors. He fought. He claimed, priest penitent privilege. He moved around rapist priests. John Paul II knew about this. So what you're doing is what had to happen in Catholic Church, in Boston, in New York, in Los Angeles. So what you're doing, the Catholic Church has paid billions and billions because someone like you and others dared to stand up and says this has to change. So part of changing the conversation, expanding the criticism of the church and the exposure is now you're doing what a lot of Catholics had to do. You watch something that's remarkable. You can go on YouTube and just Google Cardinal Roger Mahoney deposed. And when you see that son of a bitch, that he had a lot of pedos, a lot of pedophiles. You know, when you see him in deposition, you see what a coward he is when he's stripped of all the wealth of the Catholic Church, and he could possibly become a criminal defendant and go to prison. When you see Cardinal Mahoney in deposition, you can see. In fact, this is an interesting comment by Adam Carmona, who's a regular. Cults become extended phenotypes of their founders. Scientologists are fitted with Hubbard's neuroses and fears. Why did Hubbard do this to children? Why does Miscavige continue it? Why, Jamie? Why do they continue this extent? This is an interesting comment.
It's done for two reasons. It mostly has to do with the same reason we had chattel slavery in the United States. Very inexpensive labor. It is it's a labor cost, right? If you can have people that you own working for free once you buy them, you don't have to pay them every week. You can build an economic system at a very low cost. And the reason, and but again, you have modern people, ex-Hubbardites, and you'll hear this thrum constantly. They say it all the time. It's if it wasn't so diabolical, it would be hilarious. And they'll say they're all slaves. So when an ex-member who claims to be an authority says they're all slaves, and there's no differentiation between someone whose brain is developing, again, they are all slaves. But if you have somebody that has no past because they're a child and is completely malleable. Now, I've talked to ex-executives, if you want to call them that, in the paramilitary, where they told me that there were evaluations and studies that were done that said that when people were recruited under the age of 16, they stayed in the religious paramilitary for decades longer than when regular people were recruited, because they have no baseline and they're getting conditioned into these behaviors. They're getting their brains physiologically damaged while they're developing, and they're malleable. So you've stripped them of their history and you're saying, well, you weren't born in Toledo, Ohio, and raised in, La Cañada, and you went to this elementary school, and they're given this kind of upbringing. No, they're told you're this trillion-year-old fallen god that has lived millions of lives. They've just stripped you of your history, and then you don't know what those trillions of lives are. So now your entire background is a mystery. You're nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Also, that's robbing you of your history. Taking away your history.
It's taking away your history, and then they're putting you in an environment, a bubble environment, where you have no orientation, which is exactly what they're doing with the Middle Passage.
And to your answer, they're not all slaves. Trish Duggan is not a slave. Her money manager, Osman Ozan, is not a slave. The wealthy OT class, slavery is very relative to the amount of money you kick in. So the wealthy publics, adults, people who give money, they're not slaves.
Yeah. So again,
no, I want to make this point. Slavery, to say they're all slaves, they're not. They might be mind controlled, which is quite a different thing. But when you're running a business to Hubbard stats and you're free to come and go, that's quite different than being in birthing.
Listen, if I'm a 20-year-old guy that was recruited into this thing, I can walk off and get police protection if they try to recapture me. If I'm a 5-year-old child, and this is the only world I've ever known, I am in an existential prison that even if you end up surviving it physically, you're not going to be able to have a life.
You don't have the means to do, you don't have the means to do it. Here's another phony image, a manufactured image. This is why I want to show it. Now, look at this. They want to show young people, oh, look, you can be next to the religious leader steering the ship. But interpret this for me again. She was likely born in, right?
She's likely born in, it's all she knows. She's been indoctrinated with this. At 35, 40 years old, she's going to wake up in an existential nightmare. You have a guy here that micromanages everything.
Yeah.
And she's terrified of him.
Oh, she's probably she's absolutely look at her. Look at her body language. She's terrified.
Yeah, and again, if 95% of the efforts, the YouTube channels, the efforts of all of these people that want to quote expose it or whatever, turn their efforts to the crimes against children, the speed in which this thing would be over or completely neutered would be accelerated by 100, if not 1,000 times. People. So here's the dichotomy, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
This goes to why the Catholic Church thing took so long. It's a paradox. People do not want to look at child abuse. They just don't want to look at it. They don't want to hear about it. It's overwhelming. It's too much. But through repetition, if you can get them to look at it, if you can get them to see it, once they see it, and once they really get it, no mas. They won't tolerate it. It's the ultimate crime. It's the ultimate thing that you can't do. But the problem is that the Hubbardites that have escaped and are against this stuff, they have not come out in outrage of what they did to the children. I don't know why. I don't want them harmed. I don't want them told they're bad. I don't want anything. It's okay in life to be accountable. I'm held accountable all the time. I'll be held accountable. I have people come up to me all the time going, "Hey, Mustard, you effed that one up. You did me did me like that. You screwed up." You know what I do? If I did it, I go, "Yeah, I'm accountable."
Yeah, you own it. But let me jump in, because you just said something that's important, and I'm glad to be helping change the dialogue, to be focusing on it. This picture tore me up. This kid, the hat's too big for him. The uniform's too big. It's just too big. They went and got out of this crappy pile of shit clothes. This kid, this broke my heart, being a dad. He's warned that psychiatry, mental health that could help him is dangerous. This is, I think, part of what harms so many people who were born into are the kids, is that the source of help, mental health, or your SGB injections, neurophysiology, things for depression, I contrasted this because this is like this kid, when I saw it, this ill-fitting suit, he's even got that silver chain, so he's probably a CLO, that level. This picture tore me apart because I raised sons, right? So they take this kid, what is he, maybe 14, Jamie?
Maybe 14, 15.
15,
Yeah. Child.
He has that hat on. This
child.
Yeah, and then right next to the psychiatry industry of death. So he's being indoctrinated to not go anywhere near sources of mental help because it will kill you.
And I'll tell you, there's kids this age that are on staff all over the world. That's what they're recruiting, a lot of children for the staff organizations. And you see kids this young in the paramilitary, in the religious paramilitary. So again, if every single ex-Hubbardite tomorrow that was 70 years old said, "Yeah, we could talk about that. But I want to talk about the kids. Let's talk about what they've done to children. Let's talk about what they did to my children." They asked Lawrence Wright. I saw an interview with Lawrence Wright when Going Clear came out, and they said, "Is there anything in this book that you didn't cover?"
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Yeah, the children that grew up in it and how they're completely impoverished by their service." I grew up not going to school. I didn't have bed sheets. I didn't have underwear. I never learned to brush my teeth. The poverty conditions were beyond a developing country. And just last week, one of the founding paramilitary members from Hubbard's compound in England, last week, just a few years ago, after a long addiction to opioids, just took her own life. Right? It's still happening. People are like, "Why are you're upset about this thing in your past?" No, I believe that these kids,
still going on.
Yeah, I believe that these kids, now adults, if the people that were to claim to be on their side were to say, this is the great crime of Scientology, this is the true crime of Scientology, is the destruction of children. If the ex-Hubbardites in that 70-year-old baby boomer age range were to start saying that, because the world would see that. The world doesn't matter what I think, doesn't matter what they think. If we have this conversation on the public stage, the world is going to see it my way. It's not my way. It's not my way. People have an issue with harming children. Everyone does, except Hubbardites and ex-Hubbardites. If you go to prison and they find out, you could be a murderer, you could be a rapist, and you could have a clique and you can be cool. But if they find out that you hurt kids,
you're gone.
You up.
You're gone.
Except ex-Hubbardites. We're all the same.
Look at Travelology's comment. Why our former execs do not talk about this? Looking away from this is easier than holding oneself accountable and responsible.
They'll mention it. They'll talk about, when I was a kid, I grew up in it. This happened to me and that happened to me. But it's not a full evaluation of importance, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to be effective in getting understood, you can't. Everything is not everything. A can of soda is not a book. Okay, so this happened to me where the food at Stonelands was bad when I was growing up in England. Okay, well that's horrible, but it's not what Liz Gale showed, which was just a fraction of 200 something kids that had been damaged, and a lot of the kids on that list were no longer with us, and a lot of kids were off that list. Okay, if we look at the true crime of this thing, is the systematic enslavement and destruction, physical destruction, child labor, and destruction of the child mind of children. And that was where the main focus was, because that is the greatest crime that Hubbard ever committed, that Hubbard's group ever committed, and no one talks about it. They'll talk about it anecdotally, and I mean, they did an amazing job in the aftermath. But we're all aged out. We're all adults now, so they're not looking at us when we're telling our stories. They're not seeing that that's happening to a 5-year-old.
No, and this is one reason I have compiled literature. This is how they look pre-year slavery. A unit of production. This is a young man. He's a waiter. He's a waiter at Flag. This is why I distinguish between the publics who pay and the Sea Org, and these are two discontinuous. Sea Org cannot fraternize or talk to. Just
let me ask you a question, Jeffrey. You're a dad. You raised 2 sons, not in Scientology, right?
Yeah, no. Not anything.
Just curious. Do you think if I walk up and I punch a 40-year-old man in the face, or if I walk up and I scream at them, and I walk up and I slap and punch a 5-year-old in the face, is that the same, Jeffrey?
No, not at all.
Are you sure? Because every ex-Hubbardite acts like it's the same.
It's not the same.
So what is the problem, Jeffrey? That's my question that I ask you. Why is there this concept that this is what we have to get at. Why is there this concept that everywhere else in the world, people agree that a child is a child and needs a special protection, and the damage that's done to them in their brain when they're a child is devastating for the rest of their life? We have science that proves it. We have data science that says it's the leading cause of disease, is one's ACEs score.
Yeah.
Okay. But why, in relation to this group, is everyone?
I can't answer that question other than to refer back to your idea that if we're all trillion-year-old Thetans, Hubbard said, and Tony Ortega's brought this up, that a young girl should not shudder at being kissed by a man. You know that quote?
Yeah, I do. It's in Dianetics. I never understood it.
It's pedophilia.
What I thought he was saying, and maybe this is like the cognitive dissonance.
I'm sorry. That's how I read it. That's how I read it. And I've had Scientologists try to explain to me why. Okay, let me vent for a while. Okay, you talk about genocide. Science of Survival, Hubbard calls for a genocide of everyone 2.0 or below on the tone scale. I have been saying that for years. If Scientology had the power, it would carry Hubbard's genocide forward. He said you either audit them up above 2.0 or you dispose of them quietly and without sorrow. Part of it is they don't give a fuck. They can't understand. They think that 5-year-old is the 40-year-old, is the 70-year-old. They lack the power to discriminate because they've been indoctrinated, brainwashed, and they don't want to be accountable for it. They want to run away and hide. They don't want to confront it, to use their own terms, right? So there's so much, like, I have talked to Scientologists who said, oh, I didn't, yeah, genocide's there in Science of Survival, but it's not real. We never talked about it. Yeah, but if you came to power, you would, because look at your fair game. Look what you'll do to single individuals. If they actually had power, look what they do to the world. So you're raising the right questions. I don't know that I can fully answer them, Jamie. I don't know that I can. I can't. But I'm willing to.
Say, if they would, like Cece did before she died, that meant a lot to me just because, I mean, she was in rough shape, but she was the head of accounting at the advanced division on Berendo. When I was a little kid, I went and got my little pay from her, you know? And so I knew her, I grew up with her kids. So her coming out and saying, this is the great crime, it meant a lot. Would you know what it would do if 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 of these 70-year-olds got together and wrote an open letter to these kids apologizing, saying, we look past it? It's not about making you wrong. No one's going to jail. No one's going to give a scarlet letter. No one's going to get a lower condition. No one's going to the rehabilitation or the concentration camp. It's not about making you feel bad. We're all victims here. But what it would do for the relief of these kids that are my age, to be told that what happened to us happened to us. It's killing us that we've been through this and we're being told it's nothing. We're all the same. It's all the same. That what happened to us at 5, in my case, as a baby, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, never going to school, the medical neglect, 5 near-death experiences in a poverty you can't even imagine, is the same as a guy that was recruited on the streets of Portland or LA at 20.
Yeah.
When
it's qualitatively different. It's qualitatively different. And this is why
what it's doing, and I want you to comment on this, Jeffrey. I believe that is what is causing the rage. These kids are being betrayed by their own. It's not the ones that are still in there. It's the ones that are out, that are homogenizing this terrifying experience. I mean, play the Marco tape.
Yeah, we will. Our next show, we will. And part of it, Jamie, you have to enter the darkness. You have to get into the real dark heart of the beast. A lot of people are terrified of the darkness, or they're terrified of looking back or what they did. And so this is why it has to be talked about, what you're talking about, what Liz Gale's talking about, what others are talking about. And that's why
let me say this based on what you just said. I mean, Jeffrey, thank you for your passion and your ability to listen. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I'm getting relief just listening to you because I can see that you care. But I just want people to know that I'm disgusted that I'm on this video saying this. It makes me sick. It makes me sick that I have to sit here on this video and say how I feel about something to enlist help on something that's so blatantly obvious to the rest of the world that it would make your head spin. I don't want to be having this conversation. I don't want to be part of it. I don't want to be advocating for it. I want nothing to do with what we're doing right now. But no one is saying it. And I think that if it was said that a lot of kids, now adults, that you would see a massive relief in their suffering, because it's kind of like an existential gaslighting that's occurring. And one of the things that put it in my head is I remember seeing this documentary about 20 years ago where this Catholic priest was going in these little planes to all these remote villages where kids were molested. and a lot of my friends, because we were vulnerable and nobody was looking at our bodies and no one's looking out for us, the amount of sexual assault among us kids was tremendous.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of kids, friends of mine, that are no longer with us from the Melrose building because that happened to them when they were younger. And then when they became adults, they unalived themselves, a significant amount. And I'm watching this documentary, and for some of these guys, this guy's like in an Inuit village with these kind of industrial buildings on this tundra, and they're pulling these guys in to talk to this cardinal, this bishop, he's got the robes, and he came in on a small plane, and they sit this guy down, and he's brown, and he's an Inuit, and he's 70.
Mm-hmm.
And the priest says, "Thank you for coming. I'd like to apologize for what happened to you," and start saying the crime that was committed against him. And you see a 75-year-old, 70-year-old, 60-year-old man become 5. They break in a way you can't even imagine. Can you imagine Laura, at the ranch, not seeing her parents, being controlled in the way that she's being controlled, and with this constant thing of upstat, downstat, low tone, uptone, like this kind of mental, existential, psychological warfare on a child mind. Okay, it's death.
Yeah. And you have to advocate for it because you can, and you're articulate, and you have a moral obligation, to do this. You've taken it. You've taken that up, and I think it's tremendous because it's a very difficult, hard, complex topic that people don't want to talk about. I'm willing to talk about because it is difficult. And if you don't talk about the difficult, the actual real dark, twisted stuff that's resulted in people unaliving themselves.
Let me ask you this, Jeffrey. Did you raise your children like Scientology kids, either public or
Not even, no.
Okay, why not?
No.
Why not, Jeffrey? Why didn't you raise them that way? I mean, we're all the same.
Because I'm not a Scientologist.
No, but what would your children be like? The children, I want you to think of the children that you raised, the 2 sons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. What would those kids be like if they had been raised like me? What would their personalities be like? How would they be doing in life? How would their personality, how would they be towards their dad? What would their outlook on existence be? Why didn't you raise them that way, Jeffrey?
Okay, I'll put it this way. If I were in the Sea Org, they would have turned out one way. If I were a wealthy public, they would have turned out another way. You have on Saturday Night Live a Sea Org. A Scientologist. She's Chloe Feynman, right? Mm-hmm. She wasn't raised like you. She's on Saturday Night Live. Chloe Feynman. So it depends, Jamie. It's context dependent. Okay. If you were born in the Sea Org, you're fucked. If your parents are wealthy OTs, you get a different life. The stories about Bob and Trish Duggan did with their adopted kids, the allegations are they shipped them off to South Africa when they became problematic. They put them in the org down there, donated money.
There was a guy
here, you take care of them. It's your problem. So, Jamie, it depends on how much money you have, how your kids turn out.
But there's a lot of there was a lot of working class.
So
Harvardites when I was.
Yeah. I know, but I'm just
saying. Let's keep it. Let's talk. You and I might do. You and I, yeah. Well, let's talk.
It depends. It depends if you're.
Let's talk about the paramilitary kids. Let's talk.
Yeah.
Why did you not?
About this.
What would your sons be like if you had raised them with the same principles, the same education, the same modality of treating a child? If you didn't raise them as Jeffrey Augustine the way you did as a corporate man, but you went and you raised them like young paramilitary, religious paramilitary kids, akin to what you see in Hubbard's Nightmare, how would they be?
They wouldn't have turned out well.
How can you say that, Jeffrey? I mean, we're all slaves.
Because no.
They'd be fine. They'd be just like the 20-year-olds. They'd be just like the 20-year-olds that were tricked in, Jeffrey, wouldn't they? Wouldn't they? Come on.
No. No,
No, they would. Are you sure? You sure,
no,
Jeffrey?
Jamie. This is why I made a point earlier to say, when you go on 20 and you sign those contracts, okay, even if people lie to you, it's quite different. No, they wouldn't have turned out. If
Anybody
you're
that says that
listen, if you're wealthy, it's really different than if you're in the slave class like you
it
were.
didn't save Johnny Lewis, and it didn't save
No,
Philip Gale, and it didn't save.
no. And you make a good point. So some kids, like it didn't save Tommy Davis. So let me rethink this. Tommy Davis was all set to go to Stanford, I believe. And I know the two,
Columbia.
I'm sorry, Columbia, thank you. I know the two Regs who talked him out of it, the two Sea Org Regs who talked him out of it. You know, so no, my kids wouldn't have turned out well at all. You're right. Maybe, but why, Beck walked away from it, right? No, my kids wouldn't have turned out. I think if I were a wealthy public, they would have turned out better than if they were in the slave class. So there's that differentiation. But you make a good point with, we talked about Johnny Lewis, the tragic ending where he unalized himself before murdering his landlady. It wouldn't have turned out well at all. They wouldn't. In fact, I warned them about the dangers of religion altogether.
But like, take one of your sons and raise them how I was raised. What do you think that son put his face on me, and what is he doing today?
If they had your strength and passion, they would be doing exactly what you're doing. If they didn't have your resilience, they might not be here. Okay? You have resilience. No, I'm just saying that.
I know, I get it, but I get it, but I'm just saying, listen, anybody that thinks that somebody that joined this thing at 20 years old is the same as a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old.
My kids wouldn't have turned out well.
There's a thing called neuroscience. There's a thing called biology. The only people on the planet that don't think that the worst crime that Scientology would have ever been committed would be ex-Hubbardites. Okay, and that's, I don't want anybody to be made to feel bad. That's not the point. The point is, let's just say what happened. Let's just say what happened. That's all I'm asking for.
Yeah, that's why we're on the show talking. Let's just say what happened.
I mean, if you want to see what saying what happens look like, it's so uncommon. Patrick, thank you for your comment earlier. This is what I'm talking about when I say this. It is so uncommon for any ex-Hubbardite to actually be honest about what happened. It's less than 1%. If you want to know what if you want to know what it looks like, if you want to know what it looks like, go and look at the Truth Rundown series with Hy Levy. Look at that interview. Go and look at the interview with Sheila Huber, and then compare that to every other interview of people you see of that generation. 100 other interviews.
Yeah.
If you want to know what accountability looks like, go look at the Hy Levy interview. Go look at the Sheila Huber interview, and they're better off because they were able to call it what it is. Okay,
we can do a show on those where we walk through Hy. So
I'm sorry, Jeffrey. Sorry if I got excited there. And if you want to know, in this book, I put, it's funny. I got on an interview, a comic books interview, and I really the other day, and I really didn't think that anybody would bring up my Hubbard Scientology past outside of Child X in a comic books interview. And so I just think I'm going to get these softball graphic novel questions. I get on this interview 3 days ago, and it's this young Black girl. And I could see, and I went and saw some of her interviews beforehand, and I thought, oh, this will be easy. I don't really need to prepare for this interview. She's going to ask me about comic book graphic novel stuff. But she had looked me up, and she was prepared, and she went straight into it. Started asking me very aggressive questions about my past. And I said to her, hey, this isn't like some of your other interviews that I've seen. Like, this is aggressive. How much do you know about me? She's like, I know everything about you. And I said, how did you find Hybrid? Okay. Yeah. And she said, can I be honest with you? And I said, of course. And she said, very triggering. And I said, why? And she said, because I grew up in extreme poverty as a JW. Yeah. And I had a hard time with it. I had a hard time with it. So I really do feel there's an existential terror in this that I'm able to show, because I'm painting the images with the painter. I art directed it. Every image you see mostly came out of my head. In a way that with words, it's just not the same. You're going to get a different experience from a movie, right, than you are from reading a book.
Is it your version of Picasso's Guernica? Artists transmute horror into art.
It's funny. I don't see this as a dark book because I'm just writing what happened.
But it triggered her. It triggered her. Picasso, after the bombing.
Others might see this thing is darker than it is. I remember having a conversation with Mike Rinder one time, and I said to him, I was telling him about my past and being born in it and stuff like that. And I said to him, Mike, I got to tell you, man, I when I look back on this stuff, it just seems rather banal to me. Right? It just seems like it doesn't really seem like much. And he laughed and said, me too. I know exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Right? You become inured to it. And we have become inured in this awareness of what we're doing, of what children mean in this equation.
But this interview shows you're not inured to it at all.
Yeah, but I'm afraid that people I'm
you're
the belief that people will watch this interview, even though I think that anybody in the regular world would watch this interview and say he's making total common sense. Anybody that was connected to that movement, that's of the baby boomer generation, that would watch this would say that I'm a blowhard.
No, they wouldn't. I don't agree. I think they would. A lot of them would stop watching the interview. But again, that's why I wanted to help expand the conversation.
But also,
to what it really is, what it actually is, because the trail of human wreckage, you have seen, I have seen, what it's cost me.
Well, you have a dead stepson.
Yeah, and what it really costs, the real actual cost. So I'm glad you're doing what you're doing to bring.
And it all comes down to the title of this show and why we're on Scientology Money Project. All of this occurred because of money. And I don't mean getting Hubbard money. That's part of it too, but it's really labor costs. The same reason we had chattel slavery. I'm not trying to make a comparison, but a dead person is a dead person. A maimed person is a maimed person. It really comes down to, why were these children held in captivity? Why was I held in captivity? Right?
It was money, because
so that I could
money.
So I could be. Why were the conditions so bad?
Well, they money.
Because they didn't want to spend money until we were old enough to do labor, and they didn't educate us so that we wouldn't have a choice. Also, slaves didn't get educated, right?
Yeah.
So, are there slaves? Are the people that are currently in the Hubbard's religious military or Miscavige's religious military, are they slaves? I don't know if they are. They're definitely being mind controlled. Are the ones under 18 slaves? They are by definition slaves.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is why you have to differentiate rich and poor statistically. Okay. If you're born into it and you're young and your development is embedded in that, you're worse off. My kids have grown up in
everything that occurred, Scientology Money Project, everything that occurred is to keep the labor cost at a minimum, to raise us so that we could be cheap labor, and to pay as little as possible, like we were pigs, until we were old enough to extract as a resource of labor. This
exactly.
Is economic.
It's all slave labor.
Yeah, it's a physical crime, it's a visceral crime, but it's also an economic crime.
And they do this under the cover of religion, which is egregious. And when you realize what Scientology really is, how it violates public policy, it should not have it. And that's a conversation for another show. But next time, let's talk about Marco. And I'm willing to talk about it because it's dark and fucked up, and someone has to talk about it. It's disturbing. It's so disturbing, and yet it has to be talked about.
And let me just say to the kids that I
It's
grew up with that are watching this,
yeah.
guys, it doesn't matter what anyone else says. What happened to you was unconscionable and was a psychological and in many cases a physiological terror that is beyond belief. But I see you. I see you, and know it. Know it. When I see somebody like Emily Armstrong, I don't care if she's still in. She's a hero to me because I know what she went through being at that ranch. I know the psychological pressure of just being separated from your parents. That alone can create sociopathy.
Yeah.
That alone can create a level of complex post-traumatic stress that makes a person completely dysfunctional for the rest of their life. And I've got a lot of scars. I'm not claiming to be healed.
No, not at all. And then that's one reason we can talk, and we talk a lot behind the scenes. And so, Jamie, let's wrap it up because it's been, and we'll have more interviews.
Okay.
Next time we'll do
Okay.
Marco. I'm
Okay.
glad you were on. Anything final?
Just thank you for being willing to talk about this. And we need a new slogan, okay? That the crimes against children is the true crime against Scientology, is the true crime of Scientology. The crimes
And
against children are the true crime of Scientology. The crimes against children is the truest and harshest crime against Scientology. That's not because I grew up in it. I'm me. That's because that's what it is objectively by anybody, by any thinking normal person in the world.
and it's based on and it's based on money. That crime you're describing is based on money and greed. And Scientology is the cult of greed. So there's a greed that destroys children. It's an economic crime, but it's a crime of greed that destroys people. And that's how you correctly describe Scientology. It's a system that destroys people, especially children, just for greed. And it's the pointless acquisition of real estate and everything else. So,
and if
Jamie,
anybody knows me, knows that I don't normally talk like this, but I don't know how, like, if I say I'm holding a pineapple for 40 years and people keep saying that's a cheeseburger, it becomes frustrating.
Jamie, I am not at all, your intensity does not bother me. Okay. In fact, I can embrace it. That intensity comes out of a great deal of pain, and often it's hard to talk through pain. You have to be intense. That pain is real. I want
the kids,
and that intent.
Yeah, I want the kids to grow up like.
Yeah,
I want the kids that grew up like me to know that it's real.
Yeah, and it's a very intense. It's a very intense matter to talk about. I'm glad to talk about it because I deal with intense stuff all the time. Not everyone can. You can deal with intense things, and you have a gift of doing it in art, but also like this, just coming out and saying what it really is. So thanks for being on. And there's not really any good way to end a show like this except thank you for being on and sharing your heart.
Thank you for the courage just to hear me, Jeffrey, and to acknowledge. Yeah, it means a lot.
Well, you're welcome, you're a friend, and we'll see you next time on part 2. And thank you for coming on and sharing it because it was very difficult, but that's what we do, Jamie. You and I can do this. We have to do it, So I hope you get your message across. We'll see you next time. Jeffrey Augustine for the Scientology Money Project. Jamie, thanks you for being on, and I'm going to just fade out of this thing with the beast because that's what we're dealing with. Scientology is the beast. We'll see you next time.